Prayer at athletic events demeans the reverence of God and cheapens... Oh, yeah, I screwed that up completely. Prayer at athletic events demeans the reverence of God and also cheapens the athletic event itself.
Praying at athletic events can express authentic piety and reverence for God.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Michigan, and I serve as the moderator for the day. We have a team of panelists, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also a minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, my name is Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm Professor of Ethics and History at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
And now we turn to today's topic, one that has received a lot of attention over recent months. In the recent Supreme Court case, Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, the court decided 6-3 in favor of a Bremerton, Washington public school football coach who had lost his job for praying in public on the 50-yard line immediately after games. In response to that case, Perry L. Glanzer wrote a recent blog post at Christian Scholars Review about the inappropriateness of performative prayer at athletic events. First, he said, Christian teachers should not force students from a variety of religious backgrounds to pray Christian prayers as a matter of justice and integrity. No Christian would tolerate Hindu prayers being forced on them, he says, or on their children. In a Wall Street Journal essay entitled When the Prayers at School Aren't Yours, Joseph Skibald writes that he was subjected daily at school to prayers prayed in Jesus' name. Despite this practice being against the law, he writes that this made him feel excluded. Second, any sort of prayer at a public school event, no matter how genuine, would seem to violate Jesus' command in Matthew 6, verse 1, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." Third, Glanzer writes that his experience of prayer at high school athletic events in Texas was done as a, quote, superstitious ritual of nominal Christians, end of quote, more for good luck and as a sociological bonding ritual. Those athletes, he claims, quote, may have identified as Christians on social science surveys, but they were actually the leaders of the Epicurean faction in high school, end of quote. So is there a time to use prayer at an athletic event? Glanzer argues, yes. It may be appropriate at a private religious university or school, not as a good luck ritual, but as a genuine way to focus everyone on their higher purposes, such as repentance over bad behavior and the importance of God, not sports, and winning as being the central narrative and focus of human life. With all this in mind, we asked our panelists to discuss this case and address at least the following questions. Firstly, do the panelists agree with Glanzer's analysis of prayer at athletic events? And where do they disagree? Secondly, Is prayer at public events at all ever appropriate? When and when not? And finally, does prayer at athletic events cheapen prayer and religious commitment? We're going to go back to those that started our program for the opening comments and the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, I genuinely believe that prayer, particularly at sporting events, in public, not at a private university, but in public football games, even if it's after the game. I mean, I don't want to get into the argument of the Supreme Court case. It's really, to me, I find that has always, for me, cheapened my Christian faith. I feel like people are indeed performing a prayer to be seen as if there's just some sort of pious activity that people are engaged in. Now, I hope that people who are playing the game and the coaches are indeed themselves pious people who pray that their efforts would help everyone in their moral character in the game, that they would be fair players, that they would play to the best of their ability, that it would focus them and that their gifts are not their own as athletes, but they're actually gifts of God to be used to God's glory. I'm happy for all of that. But what troubles me is this kind of dragging out prayer in public to make it look like this is such a wonderful activity. We're doing all this great thing for God. And it comes really out of my conviction of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, don't pray in private, don't pray in public. I mean, prayer is important, but it's about your relationship with God, not something that you're doing to be seen by other people. I mean, I'll even go so far as I'm troubled by people who make this spectacle of even prayer in restaurants, which, I mean, I've been part of groups. Well, let's praise was a witness to the rest of the people in the restaurant. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, that's embarrassing. Like, just bow your head. I mean, you don't have to make a deal of it. So I have that. And some of this comes maybe because of our own tradition in the West. I mean, I know that in the English Protestantism, in its education, used to associate Christian piety with strong male bodies and a kind of sense of virile masculinity, that this is, to the glory of God. So I understand there's all of that, but to me it just conveys the wrong impression, not only to the public, but I think it cheapens the faith as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think that a prayer at an athletic event can be an expression of piety and reverence, and really an honest prayer seeking God's help and protection. But it's very difficult to do for all of the reasons that Carl articulated, as well as some of those pointed to by Professor Glanzer. The reason that I think it can be done and can be done well is if it's an authentic call upon God in a way in itself that's not divisive. I think we have a very hard time understanding the role of an opponent in athletics, and even an opponent in politics in our society today, where we turn opponents into enemies, all right? And we turn politics into war, whose object is to obliterate an enemy. And I think asking God's presence, guidance, protection in a way that's authentically thinking that, and not turning God into a mascot, is a very important way that might help deliver us from the militarization of every activity that's a human activity. And so I think that they have to be more intentional and more aware of exactly what are we asking for and how are we asking this of God to deliver us, from this sense of destructiveness. And so that's my point on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I looked over the précis that we had before we began this meeting, I was a little bit concerned about Glanzer's comment that seemed to suggest that Mr. Kennedy forced students to pray with him. And I think that everything I have read in news and online and so forth has not suggested that that is part of it at all. That he does it for whatever reason, and I have no way of looking into the heart of Mr. Kennedy and knowing what's his motivation. Though if he's an evangelical Christian of a certain type, and I could say, well, maybe he's thinking he's giving a public witness and so forth, and maybe he's talked to a few people. I don't know. I can't tell you. But I would say to jump to that starting point, I think is a difficult thing. I do hear what Carl is saying very, very much. I am very concerned about anybody that shows pious action or pious activity in a public way so as to call attention to me. Okay? And I think that's precisely what Jesus is standing against when he talks to those who are doing things out of a public display of my righteousness. See how good I am. See how humble I am. See how honest I am, or see how generous I am by giving these alms or whatever. It's not about us. It's about, if we really are talking about a genuine piety, it's about God and our relationship with God. And that can be done, I think, in an authentic way. But it is, as you say, it's a very difficult thing to do. So I think it does, in a sense, in this particular case, I would say, especially since it's been called to national attention. I don't know what he's going to do from now on out. I don't know whether he'll ever be hired as a coach again, or whether he'll get his job back, or whether he even cares that he gets a job back. It's on public display now, and therefore I want everybody who thinks about praying in public at such an event to think twice. Where am I? What am I really trying to do? When is this appropriate or not appropriate? How should I go about this, and so forth? I don't have a real problem, even if a coach says in the locker room before a game, I want you to go out there and do your best. I will be praying that God takes care of you. I will be praying that everybody is fair in the way they treat one another. I will be praying. You can talk about that, but you don't have to necessarily say, okay, now you can join with me in this prayer. Maybe you can, but you can also say, you can pray this prayer in your own way as well. And I think that would be much more appropriate than calling attention to me, doing this on the 50-yard line, gathering people around, maybe not even forcing, but allowing people to come around you. I think there's wisdom in backing off from that.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
So I find it interesting that over the last several weeks, this Supreme Court case keeps coming into our consciousness, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to look at it from this lens of performative prayer. And I'm sensitive to why people feel like they want to pray after a football game. You just spent the last couple of hours trying to push your opponent's face into the mud, and literally, it's a violent game. It's tremendous fun, but it's, you are trying to cream your opponent. And so to gather together with the people you were just trying to harm a few moments ago, and to hold hands on the 50-yard line and say, hey, we're all together. This is not really about trying to hurt each other. This is about trying to enjoy each other. I get that. And I remember for many, many years, our synagogue was part of an interfaith softball league, and the home team, whoever the home team was, got to offer a prayer at the pitcher's mound. But that was because we gathered together as Christians and Jews to say, hey, part of the glory of America is that Christians and Jews in our day and age can come together and not worry about trying to hurt each other, except, with a hard-hit softball. And to talk about what we were doing there. And that's where I think prayer can come in a public way that can be useful, is when you literally are invoking a plea to help people keep their eye on the ball, to talk about gratitude or awareness or safety. I've been asked by a friend of mine who organizes a 5K race to bring awareness to skin cancer every year, and I offer a little prayer before the race, but it's not a sectarian prayer. It's a, hey, everybody, look around at the people who are gathered to run this race. How lucky are we that we get to live in the United States of America? How lucky are we that there are such able scientists that are able to use the money that we're going to raise today to try to find a cure for this pernicious disease? And so the idea of invoking a spiritual quality to a secular event like a meeting of a legislature or a school assembly or something is fine, but the problem is when it drifts into sectarian prayer. And as a member of a religious minority, I can tell you that it's more compulsory than you think when the majority are gathered for a prayer. Because the Jewish kid needs to say, well, if I don't participate in that, am I saying I'm not really part of the team? What if the coach, thinks that I'm not being a team player and then gives me less playing time or doesn't look at me with the same level of respect as before? How do I know? Well, maybe I need to go and kneel on the 50-yard line even if I don't feel like I really want to. And that's true, I think, for anyone who's in a religious minority. And so whether it's legal or not legal, I think one needs to really think hard of what am I really trying to achieve with this prayer gathering, and am I being exclusive? Am I harming the team culture that I was actually seeking to create? And maybe think twice before you drop a knee.
So, I'm trying to read, in a sense, what you're saying, because I'm hearing a maybe at times, dependent on the reason, a question, I suppose, who's going to judge that reason? So, are we better saying let's just back off completely because it's going to be judged, it's going to be misread? Or are we leaving it up to the judgment of the person involved? I mean, where do we go with this?
I don't think I'm prepared to say back off completely. Rabbi Dan, just told us about the fact that he can pray at a secular event, essentially, and it shouldn't be problematic. We get to look at certain kinds of things and say this is good. And I think maybe it might have been more appropriate if, in fact, Mr. Kennedy is praying at the end. Might have been more appropriate for him to come at the beginning, and then bless what's going to go on afterwards and pray for the safety of the players and so forth. I mean, I'm not much of a sports fan myself. I just have never been able to get into that at all, and so it's not my culture, if you would. But I do know that some people really feel strongly about sports, and I look at it as a kind of mortal combat. It's better to put them on the field here and let them hit each other instead of sending them off to some foreign territory to fight a war. It's maybe even between nations. I think that's why the world soccer stuff is such a big issue. But I just think it would be better at the beginning if you're going to do it at all, and it might be a public blessing as over against whatever was going on in the mind of Mr. Kennedy at the end.
I think some of my attitude too is, the tragedy is reading, right? So I read an interesting essay on sports figures and their superstitions, and they're a highly superstitious group of people. They even admit that themselves. They wear the same kind of underwear, or whatever it is. There's these little things, whether it's making a sign of the cross. Serena Williams.
Go on.
Serena Williams, I have too many superstitious rituals, and it's annoying. It's like I have to do it, and if I don't, I'll lose. And I think it's this desire, it's a desire to win, to be your best, but it's like tapping into this mysterious power. And I sometimes feel that prayer does the same thing. It's really more of a superstitious kind of ritual that's done for the sake of drawing on God's power to help them be the best athlete. And I guess in one sense, I can relate to that. But on the other, I feel like it seems a misuse. Then there's Babe Ruth. I have only one superstition. I touch all the bases when I hit a home run.
I think that's I think something that distinguishes prayer from superstition is the difference between beseeching, seeking, asking, and conjuring and cajoling. The difference between luck and magic is luck is sort of a part of really any human endeavor in the physical world. So, you can cajole luck, but you can't control it, you can't conjure it. And I think that's precisely what saves us from superstition if we're willing to intentionally pray. See, that's the thing. It can be subordinated, and that's part of the problem and challenge.
Well, thank you for sharing your views. We now need to take a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back, viewers. I hope you've been enjoying our program and the question we've been wrestling with today. And we're now going to hear our concluding comments.
Prayer at athletic events can express authentic piety and reverence when it's done intentionally to ask God's protection on all people involved. When prayer is reduced to a sectarian statement, we reduce God to a mascot to do our interests and end up causing further division and also further scandal and sacrilege in the name of God.
Tony Dungy, the football coach, was deeply religious Christian, and in his autobiography, he talked about how when he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers in his second season, he got sick before training camp, and he couldn't practice, and he was lamenting that he wasn't going to make the team. And another fellow Christian on his team said to him, "Well, now I guess we know what's number one in your life, don't we?" And he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you always told me God was number one in your life, and now it appears that it's football." And he said his entire attitude about his life and his role changed in that moment, where he said, "I used to think I was a football player. And now I realize I'm a servant of God who happens to be playing football. And however God calls me to serve is going to be who I want to be." But that's the most important part. And I mention that story because I think we take some measure of offense if we think that God actually cares whether the Dolphins or the Cowboys win a particular football game. I think we appreciate, though, when an athlete has some measure of gratitude or humility for the opportunity to use their talents to the best of their ability in safety, or to be able to enjoy the camaraderie of a team sport with their teammates or people from the opposing side. And I think that prayer works in every context when it reminds us to keep our eye on what really matters. And if prayer can be done in a way that is authentic to what prayer ought to be, which is something that calls us to be our highest selves and to realize God's presence in our lives and our world, then I think that prayer is doing what it ought to be doing, so long as it's not sectarian or exclusive to those who may be invited to join.
I appreciate both of your statements. I actually, it may seem counter to that, but I actually am full agreement with you. That said, the dangers of the performative prayer are always with us. I think it's always easy, even as a person of faith, to be asking the question, am I doing something because I want people to see me doing it, or am I doing it because it's a genuine part of the expression of who I am? And of course, we struggle to make it that second. Making it public makes it more challenging, clearly. But we're at Concordia. Our coaches pray with our students, are engaged in their faith life on all kinds of levels. And granted, it's a private university. I know that the connection between faith and sports is deep. at our university. And so, and I would agree that I think that in its proper usage and what prayer is intended for, it's an important thing to utilize, help us focus on, help athletes, help all of us really focus on what's important.
I think prayer is an important part of everyone's life. This conversation that we have with God, the problem is that most of the time we just talk, we don't listen, and it really is a dialogue in a sense, you know, that God wants to speak to us and call certain things to our attention. I was thinking about this performative prayer. You know, in all the years that I taught, which was 48 years of teaching, I don't think I ever started a class without starting with a prayer. And generally, what I tried to do was to have a prayer that was pointed towards something in the lecture. I mean, I'm a historian, you know. Does God have anything to do with history? And if so, what does it look like? And how should we think of history in light of this relationship we have with God and so forth? So that's a performative prayer, but it's in a context where I'm dealing with theological students. They understand that context. They understand what I'm trying to accomplish, at least I hope they do. Out on the football field or the baseball field or whatever, I worry a whole lot about context. I do think that prayer is still appropriate, whether it's by the players or whether it's by the coach or anyone else in the audience, you know, that's there to watch in the stadium. But I do think that we have to use wisdom, and you know, that's a really good point that you made there with the football player that really rediscovered, in a sense, who he was and what it was about. So, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I think a very important conversation today. The whole sense of the role of prayer in public affairs. And I think it also goes a level deeper than that, and maybe something we can all reflect on, which is, you know, how does our faith impact the way that we relate, especially when we're relating in that sphere where we're visible, where we're seen? Is it something that is used to profile us? Or is it something that is used actually to profile who God is and who God is in whatever event is taking place? So I think that's something for us all to think about in athletics, but also perhaps even wider than athletics. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but also in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time, and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.